So one of the things I wanted to talk about really quickly is the why. We've talked about the brain science, and that's why we're showing you the techniques and tools that we are showing you. But in the big picture, why are we offering these videos? What is it that we're trying to do? The challenges that we see is that as individual trainers, we're not getting the stick. We're not getting the results we want, and so we don't get invited back to do a continuation in many of the training environments. When we're organizational trainers within an organization that's got like a training department, we aren't seeing an increase in ROI. All of those things we're providing solutions for. These videos are the beginning of that. At the end of this video, we're going to offer you an opportunity to take it deeper. This is the first step in being able to go all the way, which is our Badass Trainer Intensive. That said, let's get started. Welcome back. So glad that you're here for the third video in our 959 video series, Tips and Tools to Create Meaningful Learning Experiences. Today we're going to talk about memory and recall. So let's get started. So let's take a look at our brain hat. Currently, our brain research doesn't really have a section of the brain that we know to be related to storage. All indication is that the full brain is responsible for storage. But here's the frontal lobe and the temporal lobes. When we turn it on the inside, this is where we know the parts of the brain that are responsible for different stuff. If you look very closely, you can see the amygdala, this little pink thing. And then on the other side, there's this little hippocampus. It's kind of a seahorse-shaped object. The hippocampus is responsible for transferring short-term memory to long-term memory. And the amygdala is responsible largely for retention. So let's talk about the human memory types. There are three primary types. We have the sensory memory, which is less than a second long. We have short-term memory, which is less than a minute long. And we have long-term memory, which is theoretically lifetime. Interesting thing about sensory and that fact that it's like less than a second, I want you to think about when you walk into a room and you smell chocolate chip cookies baking. What happens, right? What are the memories that begin to play? If you had a grandmother who baked wonderful chocolate chip cookies and you smelled that as you walked through the door, right? Olfactory memories are sensory. They're one of those things that the memory itself is only less than a second long, but the emotion that it triggers the recall of the memory. Does that sound like something that might make sense based on the components of the brain that are involved? Remembering that the hippocampus stores it, but it's the amygdala, which is also related to emotion, is the part that is relevant to recall. Let's take a look at long-term memory. This is broken down into two primary parts, explicit and implicit. That's conscious and unconscious. The implicit unconscious is related to skills and tasks. This is that thing that happens when we drive somewhere and we arrive at someplace familiar, like from work to home, and we get there and we're like, I don't remember driving. Well, that's because your implicit memory kicked in and you remember how to make that trip without any active conscious thought. Explicit, which is conscious, is all about facts and events. That's going to be our primary focus today. There are three primary processes involved in memory and recall: encoding, storage, and recall. Remember, the hippocampus is largely responsible for the encoding and storage, and the amygdala is largely responsible for the recall. Okay? So we have our three processes. When we look at how the brain does this, we recognize that first there's input, which comes in the form of questions, tasks, or new information. That goes into that first stage where our brain has to figure out what am I supposed to be paying attention to, and then working memory, which is part of recall, because working memory has to run over there to storage, grab relevant information, and run back and say, is this what you want? Consider this a component of perseverance, right? Because if I get over and I've gone over to retrieve from storage and I come back and that piece of working memory isn't what I wanted, I have to go back and get more. This is that piece of where perseverance in learning comes into play. Over here, we have to take a look at it. We've got our working memory going and our processing speed. We now have to make a decision. And this is the first decision around the concept of encoding, okay? Because this is where I decide, is this new information? Is this new information related to old information, or is this new information completely? In that moment then, if the information is new, I have to take that up to higher order thinking, right? This is where I'm going to apply logic and reasoning. This is where I'm going to consider all of the auditory, physical, visual, and emotional input coming in to process this whole piece of information in a way that says, I now truly understand and can integrate. At that point then, I can go into memory consolidation. Memory consolidation is simply the transference of information from short-term memory to long-term memory. If, in fact, in that decision component, I decide that this is known information, I can go over to storage. Now, this may be a little piece of new information to something I already knew, and I can store it based on what I already know, right? So that's the difference of known and unknown. If the information is unknown, I actually have to create new storage. I have to have either something to hang it on, or I have to completely create new filing mechanisms. So when we start to understand that process, right, this is nanoseconds in the brain. Like, I can't even snap that fast, right? So recognizing how quickly that processing happens and how relevant that really is to all of these pieces coming together. What does this mean about design? What does this mean about delivery, right? That's really the relevance of how we talk about this and why we talk about it. There are 7 different ways that we can integrate this in to how we deliver and how we design what we are creating. First and foremost, we can chunk information, right? Take it in small pieces. This video series is exactly that, right? We have chunked these pieces in 9 minutes and 59 seconds. Don't remember that? Go back to the 959 document. Another important strategy is connecting things to prior learning or prior knowledge. If I do not know what level of prior knowledge we have, then I can create a common experience in common language. If you remember, the ball of perspective is one of those activities that we use to create common experience in common language. 3, repetition. Repeat, 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 right? If you notice, every layer of, as we talk about things through this video series, we have repeated all about what the brain is, and we've used our brain hats largely to be able to do that information. 4, multimodal, a variety of inputs of information, kinesthetic, visual, movement. 5, this one has 3 parts: relevance, emotion, and meaning, REM. The content needs to be relevant, it needs to be connected to an emotion, and it has to have meaning. 6 is stories. We respond to narrative pedagogy in big ways. We hold on to information because we connect with people through those stories. And the 7th one is simulation, scenarios, giving people the opportunity to experience what it is you're teaching them and how to directly apply it. These are our 7 mechanisms by which we can design and deliver to be able to support and reinforce memory and recall. We've gotten lots of really awesome feedback that you guys are appreciating and valuing the information and materials that we're handing you. That is so satisfying. There's nothing better than that. And we want to take you to the next step. This week we're excited to announce that we're rolling out our Mini Badass Trainer Bootcamp online course. This is an opportunity for us to take you deeper into all the things that we've talked about and more. This is where you get to see how the Mindset Scaffolding Blueprint gets applied and how all of this plays into that. Mindset Scaffolding Blueprint I developed as a way for all of us to become badass trainers. No matter what we train on, no matter what our content is, it's the step-by-step way that we can do a plug and play. Tuition for that course is $197, but because you're here with me today, we're going to offer it as a special for $97. That will be only until the end of February 2020. We're going to give you a code that will allow you to get into that course for $97. So it's MBTB97. I've been training for 25 years, and this is how badass trainers design and deliver outstanding, meaningful learning experiences. Can't wait to see you.